guys, it's Jane. I'm back here today to finish off my favourite reads from 2015. If you missed it yesterday, I talked about 7 of my favourite books from the year, which are not science fiction. Today I'm going to talk about 6 things which are all science fiction. I had a great year reading science fiction. I couldn't whittle it down to just 1 or 2, so it's got its whole own video. And here we go. I've got 3 series to talk about and 3 standalones. To start with the series, the first one I want to tell you about is Rosemary Kirstein's The Steerswoman. There are 4 volumes of this currently out, and I read all of them this year. They are The Steerswoman, The Outskirter Secret, The Lost Steersman, and The Language of Power. The world that this is set in seems at the opening to be a fairly classic fantasy sort of world. We've got low tech, we've got people living in villages. There are wizards in this world. Our central character, Rowan, is a member of the Order of Steerswomen. And a steerswoman is someone who has left their family and their local area, has gone and been trained, and then travels around from place to place asking and answering questions. If a steerswoman asks you a question, you are expected by the society always to answer, and to answer honestly, and the reverse is also true. You can ask a steerswoman anything and she must answer, and she must answer honestly. At the opening of our story, Rowan starts asking questions about an artifact that she comes across that is unlike anything she's seen before, and soon finds herself in hot water. And as the story progresses, she learns more than she bargains for about the origin of the world that she lives in and different things that are going on. So as I said, it seems like a fantasy sort of story at the beginning, a fantasy world, but it's all about peeling back the layers. And we discover that there is a lot more going on in this world. And it is a proper science fiction story. It's a very interesting thing that Rosemary Kirstein has done, and I strongly recommend people picking those up. The second series that I have to talk about is the Beldame Apocrypha series by Kameron Hurley. In some ways, this has some similarities to The Steerswoman. There are magicians in this world, and magic is spoken of, but actually it's what Arthur C. Clarke says, I think. You know, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that's really what's going on in both of these worlds. They are genuinely science fiction stories. The worlds that they're in have regressed or something. And people think about things in strange ways. The Beldame Apocrypha series is God's War, Infidel, and Rapture. So while there are some similarities between the 2 worlds, in fact, there's far more differences than similarities. This is a very dark tale. It's about a world that has been at war for hundreds of years, and that war economy has completely shaped the society of the 2 major countries that we hear about in the stories who are at war with one another. Our main character, Nyx, is a returned servicewoman who became a member of the Beldames, who are this sort of semi-official assassins guild. She was kicked out of the Beldames at the very opening of the first book, and the rest of the series is basically about her trying to make sense of her life and find something that's worth fighting for or something. She's continuing to get pulled in to political maneuverings against her better judgment. Numbers of years go past between the first book and the second, and then again between the second and the third. By the time we get to the third book, Nyx, our hero, she's kind of like an evil Indiana Jones. She will do anything. And you feel sympathy for her at the same time as she's doing these kind of pretty dodgy things. But she's just trying to make the best of the situation. By the time you get to the third book, she's an older woman who's been living by her strong right arm and her wits for a very long time, and you can tell that time is pretty much running out for Nyx. This is such a moving story. There's lots of stuff about religion. There's lots of stuff about violence and how that shapes people. There's an enormous amount about the relation between the sexes. Because these countries have been at war for so long, most of the young men have been not present in those societies for a long time, and that's made a huge impact on the relationship between men and women in those societies. Yeah, these are quite dark, but completely gripping. That's the second series that I wanted to talk about, the Beldame Apocrypha. The third and final series that I need to tell you about is the Imperial Radch trilogy by Ann Leckie. The third and final volume of this was actually released in 2015. So this is a properly up-to-the-minute review now. The first book, Ancillary Justice, won the Hugo last year. The second one, Ancillary Sword, was up for the Hugo this year but didn't win. And I think it was robbed. Well, no. Three Body Problem was also a good read, but Ancillary Sword would have been my pick. The third, Ancillary Mercy, is the one that came out this year. These are just spectacular space opera, classic science fiction. The very first book is a little bit difficult to get into because Ann Leckie, the author, is doing a whole bunch of stuff with structure, moving from different points of view, and it takes a bit of time to actually get your brain into the mode to kind of work out what it's doing. She also is using suggestive world building rather than exhaustive world building. Often in fantasy, you get really long descriptive passages which build up the world. Ann Leckie does not do any of that. She just drops you right into the middle of the action, and you've got to catch as catch can and build that world. But it totally worked for me. The first book is just a ripper. It's action-packed, completely action-packed. It's all about revenge. Somebody makes somebody else do something against their better judgment, but they have no choice. They have no free will at that point, and they do this terrible thing and then break away, and then the whole rest of the first book is really about getting revenge for doing the thing that they were forced to do. The second book is much less firecrackery. It's much more small form. It's quieter. It's more reflective. The second one is about trying to implement justice and how fraught that is in the real world. After the quiet lull of the second book, the third book is a rip-roarer. And it brings all the threads together, and it's a really full-on classic kind of science fiction story about artificial intelligence, consciousness, the value of a person, who says what is a person anyway, power, all that sort of great stuff, and in a great space opera setting. Those were my three favourite series of the year. I've got three other standalones I want to talk about, and I'm going to try and do this a bit more succinctly. The first one is Margaret Atwood's The Year of the Flood. I read this in January, and this has stayed with me the whole year. This is an amazing work. It is science fiction, arguably literary fiction as well. So I've listed it as a standalone, even though it is part of a trilogy. You could easily read this as a standalone. You don't need to have read the first book. You don't need to read the third book to enjoy The Year of the Flood. It's a post-apocalyptic world. Surprise, surprise, there's a few of those getting around on the shelves at the moment. This is absolutely one of the best. An unlikely friendship between an older woman and a younger woman, and what they need to do to get through in this world that they find themselves in. Really compelling, funny, it's beautifully written. That's The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood. The second one is a kind of crime noir science fiction story. It's China Miéville's The City and the City. I almost swore off China Miéville a number of years ago because everything of his I read, I just I couldn't get it. I didn't like it, and I couldn't get it. The City in the City is amazing, and I'm so glad that I was convinced to go back and give China Miéville another try. Basically, there's a murder goes on in a Middle European city, and we have a detective trying to solve this murder. And as that happens, a whole bunch of stuff, crazy ass stuff about what's going on in the world of this city is revealed to us, and that's an amazing read. The final one is Seveneves by Neal Stephenson. Anybody who has been watching my channel for a little while will know that Neal Stephenson is my favourite author, and it's always a good year when there's a new Neal Stephenson book. And this was no exception. Before I go any further, I have to say one more time, thank you so much to Jen from Today and Jen's Library, who found a signed copy in her local bookstore, bought it and sent it to me. So I'm just going to show you very, very quickly the scribble on the front there. That was Neal Stephenson's own hand. I'm so excited about that. This is a straight up hard science fiction story about the destruction of the world and what humanity does to try and survive that. That's what it is for the first 2/3. The final third is set in the far future, and it's looking at some of the outcomes of the decisions that were made in the weeks and months when humanity was scrabbling to get off the surface of the world. This is a classic science fiction story that's going to be read for years to come, I'm sure. If you enjoyed The Martian, I would say the next book for you to read is Seveneves by Neal Stephenson. Okay, those were my favourite science fiction reads for the year. Why don't you tell me what your favourite science fiction read for the year was? I'm sure lots of people have different ones to what I have got here. I'm going to be back in a couple of days and doing one more finishing up the year video where I talk a little bit about my reading goals that I set for myself for 2015, reflecting on that, and talking a little bit about 2016. That's it for me today. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!